Tonight on the Art House Drive-In Picture Show.
Zodiac Month continues as we grab our badges and join Lieutenant William Kinderman to track down the Gemini Killer, a serial murderer who has resumed his killing spree 15 years after his execution, with a little help from a familiar legion of demons.
And now, here are your projectionists, Charles Wood and Aaron Woodsworth.
Welcome to the Art House Drive-In Picture Show. I am Charles, and that is Aaron. Aaron, how are you, sir?
I am doing great. How about you?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little disappointed that I wasn't possessed by Legion for Zodiac Month. I thought there was going to be some synergy, but I guess that those advertising dollars fell through. So
that would have definitely helped the podcast.
It would have worked. I don't understand. It was some paperwork. You know how hell is. I mean, it's just all kinds of paperwork.
It's all bureaucracy.
That's right.
That would be hell.
That's right. That's right.
So that all tracks.
Yeah. So tonight we're talking about Exorcist 3 or Legion Exorcist 1990 or just Exorcist 1990.
Yeah.
When I saw this movie on the roadside billboard, it was billed as Exorcist 3. In the lobby inside the box office, they had one of those little announcement boards that are, they kind of have the velvety thing with the slots in it. You just push the plastic letters into them.
Yeah.
And on that, it actually billed the movie as Legion Exorcist 1990. And then once we got in, started watching the movie and it came up and said Exorcist 3, I remember looking at my girlfriend and going, what the fuck is this movie called? But wow, what a fucking movie.
Yeah.
You want to jump into it?
I would love to.
Okay, let's go. Attention patrons. The movies discussed on this podcast will be spoiled from start to finish. If you wish to experience these cinematic gems visually, please do so before continuing with this episode. We will be right here when you return. Thank you and have a pleasant evening.
And now, please enjoy our feature presentation.
In Exorcist 3, Lieutenant William Kinderman, played by George C. Scott, goes from supporting character in The Exorcist to the main character as he tries to solve a series of murders with the exact same MO as the Gemini Killer, a serial murderer who died in the electric chair 15 years earlier. These new murders begin on the 15th anniversary of the death of Father Damien Karras, one of the two priests who died during the exorcism of young Regan McNeil in the first film. To commemorate this anniversary, Lieutenant Kinderman breaks off his investigation of the first murder for an afternoon to go see It's a Wonderful Life with Father Joseph Dyer, played by Ed Flanders, another supporting character from the first film. And then the two men go to dinner. But in the subsequent days, the murders continue, all with the same MO, a severed right index finger and the sign of the Gemini twins carved in the left palm. The first murder was the crucifixion and decapitation of a young paperboy. The second murder is the decapitation of a priest inside of a confessional booth. But the third murder is the toughest. Father Dyer himself. The priest is decapitated and drained of all of his blood, without a single drop spilled, which is situated neatly in jars on his hospital table, save for the blood used to scrawl, "It's a Wonderful Life," on the wall above his bed. In the search for clues in the hospital, Kinderman comes into contact with the head of the psychiatric ward, Dr. Temple, played by Scott Wilson, who in turn nudges Kinderman towards patient X, played by Jason Miller, and Brett Dourif, a man who was found wandering aimlessly down by the river 15 years ago with amnesia and has been in the ward ever since. But recently, patient X has become more active and vocal for longer periods of time. When Kinderman goes to see the patient, though, he is horrified to find that patient X is actually his long-thought-dead beloved friend, Father Damien Karras. Father Karras has been both possessed by the entity that plagued poor Reagan McNeil in the first film and the long-deceased Gemini killer. What follows is an extended chess match of a conversation in which the Gemini tells Kinderman that these entities have found ways to project themselves into the bodies of the dementia patients, who then carry out these murders using a paralyzing drug, along with some supernatural assistance. So, no one person is committing all of the killings, but all of the killings are serving the vengeful purposes of both the demonic entity and the Gemini killer in the material world. Finally, after another murder of a nurse inside the guarded hospital, the Gemini attempts to kill Kinderman's daughter, Julie, using the body of an older dementia patient dressed as a nurse. But this attempt on Julie's life is stopped by an exorcism on patient X by a priest named Father Morning. Kinderman returns to the cell and shoots patient X, sacrificing his friend Father Karras' possessed body and trapped soul for the sake of humanity. So, what do you remember about seeing this film for the first time?
Well, first time I've seen it was just the other day. So
seriously, really?
Yeah, because I had seen Exorcist and I had seen Exorcist 2. I guarantee I saw that with the older Reagan.
Right.
But for some reason, this one slipped under the radar. But what's funny is I really like both versions of the Stellan Skarsgård kind of prequel-y thing with von Sydow's character.
Well, it was like the Paul Schrader movie, and then there was also the Renee Harlan version of it.
Yeah, which I like both of those, but for some reason 3, it just would have been one of those, like it's on the shelf at the video store, and I just didn't see it, didn't rent it.
So you got to see what is considered one of the scariest moments in horror film history.
I've seen that clipped.
Like out of context. Okay.
Yeah, just like top 10 scariest scenes ever filmed, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Which I could totally get. It is creepy looking, but in context, it's just even better.
I remember in the theater, that was nearly a heart stopper.
Oh my God, I can't imagine.
I mean, I was scared.
Yeah.
Legitimately watching it. Whereas, you know, as a, 9-10-year-old kid watching The Exorcist on VHS when it first came out, I wasn't really all that scared by The Exorcist. Like, it just didn't.
No, me neither. And I know we've talked about this either off mic or it's a great movie.
Yeah.
But I know a bunch of people who it's in their top 5 horror movies ever, and I don't see it that way.
Yeah. And, we talked about this. Like, I don't tend to rank stuff just because.
Yeah.
It really, for me, it's a case-by-case thing. It depends on what kind of mood I'm in. It depends on when I see it, what the conditions are. There are all kinds of stuff that go into it. And so I don't ever have like a hard and fast list of stuff that I just say, this is it,
Me too. I have like my top 5 today.
Yeah,
like, right now, because an hour from now, who knows?
I used to think that when people were like that with movies, that it was because they were fickle. But as I've gotten older, I realize it's because you're going with the ebb and flow of who you are.
Yeah.
And you're kind of saying, okay, well, I'm not the same person now that I was 10 years ago. But it's also hour to hour, right? Like, like what I'm in the mood for to watch this morning would be different from this afternoon, from this evening.
Absolutely.
So, I watched the first Exorcist again. Actually, I watched the version you've never seen, like that one that they put out in 2000, because I thought, well,
oh, yeah.
I want to get like as much of the information as possible. And supposedly William Peter Blatty had been pushing for Friedkin to put out that version they put out in 2000 with the spider walk down the stairs and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's creepy.
I mean, it's creepy, but like today, that's like the first 5 minutes of a horror movie. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I really think that The Exorcist is a movie that has to be firmly rooted in the year that it was released.
Yeah.
It was horrifying for 1973.
Right.
Because we didn't have the entire horror film canon that we have today of modern horror.
Right.
At that time, we had a different kind of horror. And
Right.
so what you were seeing was the studio making a movie that very much felt like a B-movie type subject, but treating it very seriously. Because The Exorcist is basically a family medical drama, pretty much.
Right.
Until the last probably, 40 minutes or whatever, when
True.
the exorcism really takes place.
And it's all about whether or not you are frightened / horrified by the religious aspects of
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Which I think you and I both were like, hey, that's an interesting movie. But at no point am I like, oh, God, I hope I don't get possessed. Unless
Right.
it's to help the podcast, obviously. But,
Right.
but I am not like, oh, this could happen to me.
Yeah.
And
Right.
there are people who live in fear of this. Some are family members for me.
Sure. Yeah.
That concept is horrifying to them.
Yeah.
To me, that's never something I'm going to lose sleep over.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of like, you mean somebody else takes over my body and I might be like 50 times stronger than I normally am? And it's just kind of like a
and
mental
then they
vacation.
can get blamed for everything I do?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Now what's going to happen is I'll get possessed by a demon and then this show will become something totally different.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
It'll be all Satanist films. All Satan all the time. So, but this movie, Exorcist 3, I kind of feel like it's a movie, if you look at it in just about any era, you're looking at it and saying, oh, fuck, that's a legitimately scary movie. And I think most of it is the way that Blatty uses anticipation and silence a lot of the time.
Absolutely. And it's a scarier movie than it should be.
Yeah.
Given the cast, I don't want to slam anybody in it. Everybody in it is great, but it's just all the mood and everything. It is surprising how many creepy movies George C. Scott has been in.
Yeah. It's weird because, he's investigating these murders in this hospital, and it makes me think of that Patty Chayefsky movie that he was in called The Hospital, where he's a doctor in this hospital and this weird angel of death is going around and killing all these patients and leaving them on gurneys and hallways and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I like that movie, but it's more of like a weird dark comedy.
Yeah.
Than Exorcist 3 is, but, just seeing it now, it makes me think of that.
Well, and there's the Sentinel or the Changeling. It's one or the other. My brother Jason and I, we've talked about this because one of them is like one of our favorite horror movies and one is also a horror movie.
Yeah, right.
I kind of think the Sentinel is the one that is awesome, but it's just funny that it's such a weird genre I would never have chosen for him, but he's very effective in it. But I guess what I mean to say is this movie is scarier than it deserves to be.
Right.
And I'm all for it because, I hadn't seen it. I'd seen the one clip. But when you see that, there's so much kind of downtime before that.
Yeah.
That's just beautiful. But there is some just untouchable acting in this movie.
We should tell people that moment that we're talking about so that they understand it and they'll know it then when they see it.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to be prepared for it. We could sit here and we could give you a blow-by-blow recap of this scene and you still will not be prepared for it when it happens.
Well, for me, I'm pretty photographic memory with film. So I'm like, this is the same shot as this scene. But then I'm just waiting, Okay, well, it can't be now because this cop is there. It can't be. And then it's just there. And you're like, oh, that's so good. That's so good.
The scene is basically shot down the hospital hallway at night. And there have been murders in this hospital. I think one murder at this point. And inside the hospital.
Inside the hospital.
Yeah. And so he's shooting down the hall at night, and you see the nurse's station, and the nurse is there just doing her rounds, and then she hears something down the hallway towards the camera. Now, by this point, they have a couple of guards stationed on the floor, and so one of those guards is there near the station, and he's reading a book or whatever, getting up, walking around.
Yeah.
And she gets up and walks down to this room, so she's walking towards the camera, and she's thinking, should I go in there? And then she goes in and she hears this clinking noise. But when she goes in there, she realizes that it's the ice from that's melting in this water in a glass on a bedside table in this hospital room. So how she heard that from down the hall, I'll never know. It was just really quiet, I guess. But then the patient in that room, there's a jump scare where he comes up out of the bed and says, why do you people bother us? Like, we can't get any rest or whatever. And then she goes back out and she's doing stuff again, and again we're on the static shot down the hallway,
and the cop gets up, moves around or something,
right? He's called away, somebody says something to him, and he walks out, and then she hears something in another room right across from the nurse's station. She goes in there and she does something, but we don't see. We stay in the hallway, and it's really fucking quiet at this point. And then she comes out of the room, and when she does, what looks to be a nun, but a nun wrapped in a white shroud, has these huge shears that are used for autopsies, and it goes right behind her, and you cut away before this entity cuts her head off.
Yeah.
It's frightening. And I think the precise reason it's frightening is something you and I were talking about actually before we started recording, which is the disparity in noise levels in the sound design in the movie.
Yeah.
It adds a lot to the movie. It also makes the movie incredibly hard to watch with headphones or, or whatever.
As I did.
Yeah.
I watched this with headphones, and if you're unfamiliar with George C. Scott's work, he's either whispering or full on yelling, and it was painful at moments. But absolutely, that scene is so quiet, except for the little kind of shock music, but not much.
Yeah.
It's more your own heart that goes, what? And so it was great. It's a great scene.
It really is. And it would surprise me if Rob Zombie hadn't looked at that scene before the execution of, I think it's the sheriff in House of a Thousand Corpses. I think.
I think you're right. It has to be kind of one of those because I haven't seen the last few.
Don't worry about it.
I get what he's doing. I get that he's just going to keep doing that same thing.
But it was House of a Thousand Corpses because I remember it being the one thing about that movie that I really loved was that he had this sheriff on his knees in this backyard, Otis did, and he was pointing the gun at this guy, and that song was playing. I think it was I Remember You, I think. And I think it was like Slim Whitman or somebody like that. One of those old school country singers with the high voice.
Yeah.
And as the camera craned up, the song stops and you're just sitting there with this anticipation waiting for the shot to go off.
Yeah.
And he holds it for so long before that shot finally goes off. And it's like you're expecting it, and then it happens, and it's still a shock, and it still catches you,
Yeah.
I would be shocked if he didn't at least have this scene in mind when making House of a Thousand Corpses, or at least that particular scene in the movie.
That's a good point.
But I agree with you with George C. Scott. I mean, that guy is like 0 to 60 in 2 milliseconds. I mean,
oh my God. Yeah.
And I guess Kinderman, the character that he plays, is supposed to be volatile like that in a way.
Yeah. I just think that once you cast George C. Scott, you're like, well, this character is volatile now.
That's what the character is. Because if you
Yeah.
look back at the original Exorcist, Lee J. Cobb played Kinderman. And so he brings a different energy to Kinderman than Scott does. But of course, Lee J. Cobb, I think he passed away like 3 years after the original Exorcist came out.
Yeah.
And also, I guess that's why the timeline doesn't really match up here.
I was all uninformed anyway, but I thought Jason Miller had died. And so
right.
when it was like, oh, he's in this, I was like, they don't even have, we're putting Carrie Fisher in this anyway, technology.
Oh, right.
I'm like, oh, is it just, how are they going to do that? And then he's just full on acting. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So he didn't die. And then I'm like, no,
he died after. I think he's gone now, though, right? Because he died after.
He is. I looked it up. But
yeah.
I also didn't know that Jason Patrick is his son. So,
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's an IMDb trivia from his second marriage, I think.
Wow. I mean, I think originally it was supposed to be all Jason Miller as Patient X, they call him, but, Damien Karras, basically, from the first film, but possessed by Legion and the Gemini Killer and all these different entities. But the story that I heard was that they didn't end up wanting to use him the whole time because after years of alcohol abuse, he had like wet brain. So he had a hard time remembering speeches and stuff, which, hey, look, I haven't been able to drink alcohol in years, but I'm with him about not being able to remember long speeches and things. Like I couldn't do that. So that's why you have the Brad Dourif thing going on, like the switch. Because in the movie, what happens is that we have Kinderman going into a cell to talk to this patient X, and he realizes that it's Father Karras. But because Father Karras is possessed by the Gemini Killer, every once in a while we see the Gemini Killer, who's played by Brad Dourif. He comes out, and so this person can change appearance with cuts, basically, with like film cuts.
Yeah.
The thing that I really appreciated was that they didn't try any kind of morphing type strategy or anything. It was just used with cuts and shadows, which I felt like made it even scarier.
Totally.
So I think that's why there's such a weird thing. I mean, like in the director's cut, it's all Brad Dourif, right? Like I don't think Jason Miller's not in that at all.
No.
And they actually retcon it so that Brad Dourif is Father Karras, and they have a picture of him in the restaurant where Kinderman and his friend Father Dyer are eating on the day that they're commemorating Karras's death. They look at the picture, and it's a picture of Brad Dourif in the priest's frock, and they talk about how much they loved him and everything. But then they change that when it comes to the theatrical cut, because I guess the studio wanted that. I think they wanted to get Jason Miller in there, and they wanted an exorcism at the end, which is what they got. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
But I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize.
Well, I think I'm definitely not one of the only people watching this movie who is just really confused about how Karras's body is even being used since he died.
Right.
Supposedly at the end of the first one.
Right.
So I know from just looking into it a little bit that there's like that maybe he didn't die and then he's just been in this institution for 15 years.
Well, Gemini actually talks about this in passing in the film, but it's so quick.
And it's different in the directed. This is where I think I'm getting mixed up, because the two different uses of it, depending on which one you're watching.
Yeah, in the theatrical cut, it's couched in like this kind of long speech about his maximum effort to, but he talks about how Karras did die, and that Dyer was there, Father Dyer was there, because he was administering last rites, I think, in the original Exorcist.
Yeah.
But then there was this whole thing of another priest assisting in, I think, like the preparation of Karras's body for burial. And I think that was the priest who was killed inside the confessional.
Oh.
And so basically Karras was dead, but the Gemini talks about how he was still possessed by this entity before he died. And that whoever the boss is, I take it to be like Satan or someone, wanted him to help rebuild the brain. And he said that's why it was 15 years between then and his killings resuming.
I do remember that now. I think was the demon from first one was Pazuzu? Is that the name?
I don't really know because it's all really confusing.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's the one kind of annoying thing I find about these types of movies, like possession movies and things like that, is that it's not a curable disease in films.
Right.
You know, it's like it's only remission. And the reason it's only a remission is because of sequels and things like that.
Yeah.
But I also think like from a storytelling point of view or a spiritual storytelling point of view, it seems like these stories are convenient because people that can then take the whole adage of the Lord works in mysterious ways and apply it to Satan, and then all bets are off and you don't have to worry as much about rock solid storytelling because it's like, well, it's just weird, you know?
Yeah.
So
no, it's funny. It just hit me because as we're talking about it, I'm like, when I was watching it, I thought I had it all worked out. And I thought I had it all worked out. And then we're talking about it. And I'm like, I still don't understand.
Yeah.
Who he's actually seeing.
Who Kinderman is seeing, right?
Yeah. But I will say the director's cut didn't have Jason Miller. I think this movie is way better with Jason Miller and Brad Dourif swapping spots.
Yeah, I do too.
That was so well done. Plus, I think Brad Dourif's take on it in the first one was just a warm up.
Right.
I think, what was it? Like, I'm guessing we read the same thing, that the director's cut was like he had 2 weeks to do that character, and then the reshoots, he had 2 days.
Yeah. It was something really, really compressed.
His take on it the second time, way better.
Oh,
just way better.
For the record, I think Kinderman is seeing Damien Karras the whole time. And really the change in face is more for us as the audience.
That's what I think too.
And it's more of a visual representation, which I really appreciated because really they could do what they did in the first Exorcist and have Mercedes McCambridge voice Reagan's possessed voice, which was great. It worked really well. They could have done that again, but this time, you know, Blatty decided to go a different direction. I really appreciated it ultimately because I thought it worked really well. And I think for him, it was more out of necessity because of Miller's condition rather than, you know, maybe any like artistic intention going in.
Yeah.
But I agree with you about Dourif's second pass on this because simply because of the tears in his eyes. Like
he is so good in this.
He really is
so good. I mean, I love him across the board. I'm not a huge Child's Play fan. I think he does great in that. He's been in so many things, but like Deadwood, I love. He is untouchable in everything. His daughter Fiona Dourif took that torch because she is great in so many things. So it's always a win with him.
Right.
So as I'm watching this for the first time, I'm like, oh my God, he is killing this movie. He is killing it.
Yeah, he was amazing. I mean, he was a great counterpoint to Jason Miller, too, as the real Karras, because Miller always kind of has this, especially as Karras, he has this kind of calming, soothing presence. And even as this possessed version of Father Karras, as Patient X, when you see him, you feel kind of like, okay, we're getting a reprieve here. We're not going to have this Gemini killer just go on another rant. But then before you know it, the shots change, and then there's Dourif again, and he's off, you know, so. And
then you also have just Miller, beloved hero of the first one, saying some horrible stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
With, like what you're saying, same delivery, same everything. That just made it so creepy. Like, it's a better movie with both of them.
Absolutely. And especially, too, like in the end, when he finally comes out a little bit.
Yeah.
And basically tells Kinderman, you know, shoot me now, shoot me now. Yeah. And Kinderman kills this body, effectively, you know, banishing all of these demons and everything. I mean, that
everybody's cool with, apparently.
Yeah, everybody's like, okay, he just shot that guy in his hospital cell. Like, no big deal. In the psych ward. That's great. But it makes that moment mean a lot more. I felt like, Because in the director's cut, Kinderman, after the attempt on his daughter's life, he just kind of decides to go shoot Patient X, and that's just kind of it. He goes and shoots him, and then that's pretty much the end of the movie. I think there might be a shot of the sun going down or something, and that's just the end of the movie.
Which isn't really paying attention to how these things work. Like, I love the movie Fallen with Denzel Washington.
Right.
And where you're like, okay, cool, you just killed that body. Like,
yeah, right.
I think at this point we all understand that wasn't
he's
gone. Like,
right.
how that works. But I do think it is much less about killing the demon and more releasing Karis.
Exactly.
In the theatrical one.
Right.
Which is way better because it seems like that resignation of like, all right, I can't beat you, but I can save him.
Right. I struggle with it a little bit, but I also like the open-endedness of it, of like, okay, is Kinderman going to be possessed by this?
I know, huh?
I mean, I tried to read Legion, the novel that this is based on, in preparation for this. And granted, I'm not as good at reading books anymore because of brain issues, but I got about halfway through the book. And if it were Lila, like she'd be like, well, I got halfway through this book. I got to finish this fucking book.
Yeah.
For me, it's more kind of like, what am I doing with my life right now? But I wanted to see if Kinderman was possessed, by being in such close proximity to this dying body where theoretically all these spirits are being released. But I couldn't get to the end of the book because honestly, as much as the Kinderman in this movie is a guy that I wouldn't want to spend 10 minutes with in a room, the Kinderman in the book is a guy I wouldn't want to spend 5 minutes in a room with. I mean, he is fucking insufferable in the book. And part of it, I think, is just Blatty's writing style in that, like, this movie is a procedural, basically.
Yeah.
But then you have, these supernatural elements that creep in more and more until it's a full-blown exorcism at the end, which I don't mind. But in the book, he'll have a subordinate come up to him and say, Lieutenant, we found this over here. And Kinderman, part of his character is that he kind of speaks in non sequiturs in the book. So he'll look at the guy and go, do you know anything about the Lebanese turtle or whatever, and then just starts telling him about the whole mating history and mating rituals of these turtles and how they evolved and all this stuff. And it's presented as this whole thing of like him questioning the nature of the universe and like questioning whether God's there and good and evil and all that kind of stuff. But after a while, you're just kind of like, fuck, man, just solve a goddamn crime, right?
Yeah.
Like, just fucking get in there and fucking do it. And I liked in the movie that was tamped down a lot. I mean, honestly, there's quite a bit of it in the movie, but if you read the part of the book that I read, it's a lot different. And I really appreciated that because with these movies, a lot of times the further you go into them, the further off the rails they go.
Right.
Just from a storytelling standpoint, because that's the nature of the stories being told. One thing I appreciated with this movie was that we had this kind of grounding in a procedural framework that then we could kind of riff on, we could bounce off of. And then we're saying, okay, well then how does this detective handle this situation?
Yeah.
I don't think it needed to be Kinderman, as the main character, honestly, just because they portray Kinderman as being this great friend of Father Karras who loved him. And in reality, in the first movie, they met once.
Yeah. So, no, it's funny because that now makes perfect sense because I was like, I don't even remember them really knowing each other.
No.
Is there a whole lot of backstory I don't know? But then I'm like, I didn't read the book. Like, I don't.
Right. I didn't read the first book either. I mean, I tried to read the first book years and years ago.
Yeah.
And just couldn't get through it.
No, I was the same way because it was right at the same time, though, that I was finding Stephen King. I was like, oh, wait. Stephen King won. He just won.
Yeah.
I didn't even try and read the Legion book because when it's a book that you're like, all right, this is the movie, I should read the book. A lot of the time, that's a worthwhile effort.
Yeah, right.
But I got burned from, I love Dexter. Mm-hmm. Like, I loved the series and everything. And I'm like, I should read these books. And I just remember I did not make it very far into the first one. And I think over the course of like 6 pages, the term "his dark passenger" was in there 20 times, and I'm
Oh,
like, I'm
God.
out. I don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
So I was just like, you know what? This is only a visual medium for me
Yeah,
now.
right.
I'm good with
Right,
it. I'm
right.
good with it.
I wonder, and this is a total tangent that Lieutenant Kinderman would totally go on.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if there's a correlation between when a book is written and when a film or a TV series or whatever is made from it. Like as far as the time frame between the two. Obviously, if a book is written, like for instance, the novelizations that they used to do after a movie came out,
Yeah.
those ran the gamut. I mean, sometimes it
Yeah.
would just be kind of like somebody watched the movie and just wrote it down. Sometimes it
Yeah.
would be completely different from the movie. I mean, the original Star Trek The Motion Picture novelization has got some stuff that's very different from the film. I mean,
Yeah.
like extremely different. Technology's even different. And
Especially right at the era though that like how you're talking about Star Trek. Right at that era, it really was, here's the book from the, like, they came out
yeah.
like so close
Oh, yeah.
that you're like, someone literally just watched the movie and wrote a book about it and put it out. Like, okay.
Yeah. But you read up on some of those, like the Halloween novelization, Star Trek The Motion
Yeah.
Picture. Some of those, some people will say, well, the novelization of that movie was even better than that movie, and that movie was great,
Yeah.
I mean, with The Exorcist, I think that Blatty was writing it, and it sounded like he finished it, and no sooner had he finished it than Hollywood or somebody wanted to make the movie, and so then he went
Yeah.
right into writing the screenplay, and so he kind of hurried the end of writing the book and went into the screenplay. But
That makes sense.
I couldn't find anywhere if Kinderman and Karras were actually friends in the book, because like I say, in the movie, Karras is running laps on a track. Kinderman comes to ask him questions about the death of this actor, and he knows that Father Karras has some knowledge of the family and everything.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then Karras ostensibly dies at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
At the end of the
Yeah.
first movie. So when he says here that I loved him in Exorcist 3, I'm kind of like, really? Because
Yeah.
that's a real meet cute.
Absolutely.
If you fell in
Jeez.
love with him after questioning him for 3 minutes, then you've got it bad,
He's had a tough 15 years.
Yeah, right,
Like-
right. Well, and that's the thing that's funny too, is that they say the movie takes place 15 years after the original events of The Exorcist. And they even, I think even on Karras's headstone, it says 1990.
Hmm.
But the original movie came out in 1973. And it was never name checked as being thrown ahead to 1975. So
Yeah.
I don't know what was going on with the timelines. Like I said, George C. Scott and Lee J. Cobb were basically the same age as each other when they were in the part of Kinderman.
Yeah. That's
Um,
funny.
So I don't know. That kind of stuff, when you look into it as part of like a lore, bothers me. But
Yeah.
with this movie, I tend to watch it as a standalone film.
Yeah.
Now I kind of will watch it with Blatty's proposed trilogy, which is the first Exorcist movie, and then his movie from 1980 called The Ninth Configuration, and then Exorcist 3. He says those are basically the trilogy, disregarding 2.
Linda Blair has just left chat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Linda Blair's like, okay, I know when I'm not wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're karmic sequels, so
Yeah. Yeah.
what is it he said? Like, The Exorcist is exploring the nature of good and evil. The Ninth Configuration is exploring the nature of goodness. And then The Exorcist 3 is just exploring the nature of evil. And so I'm kind of like, yeah, and there are a lot of cast overlaps between The Ninth Configuration and Exorcist 3. So Dr. Temple,
Oh, yeah.
the head
yeah,
of the
yeah.
psychiatric ward, Scott Wilson, that actor.
Yeah.
God damn, he's good in this movie.
In any role, he's a win.
Well, Scott Wilson was in The Ninth Configuration too. And honestly, like, I think instead of writing books, after watching The Ninth Configuration and Exorcist 3, I think Blatty should have been a filmmaker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'd always heard that the book that he wrote that The Ninth Configuration was based on wasn't as good as the movie. And the movie is great. The movie's actually about this castle that's supposedly in the Pacific Northwest where the government decides that they're going to send all of these Vietnam vets who have gone insane on the battlefield. And so they all go there, and Scott Wilson plays this guy named Captain Cutshaw, who goes insane right before he's supposed to fly to the moon, because ultimately we find out that his deep-seated fear is of dying alone in space, especially if there is no God. And so he's at the castle, and he's one of the main characters. And then Stacy Keach plays this killer Marine who's kind of like just an animal on the battlefield. Yeah. And he cracks up and kills this kid in Vietnam, and they send him to this castle, but they portray to him that he is actually the new head of the facility, not a patient. It kind of overlaps because in this, Dr. Temple in Exorcist 3, he's as crazy as the people that he's looking after.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and we find out that he's in league with the Gemini Killer.
Yeah.
So if you get a chance to see the Ninth Configuration...
No, it's funny. It makes me sad that I haven't seen it, because I thought when we were talking about this movie, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah.
Because I immediately am like, well, I love The Ninth Gate. With Johnny Depp. Like, right, I would have seen that and just thought that was maybe a working title for The Ninth Gate for a while.
You know, Jason Miller's in The Ninth Configuration. Ed Flanders, the guy who plays Father Dyer, is in The Ninth Configuration. And again, Flanders in The Ninth Configuration is also kind of a calming presence. He's great in that. And a couple of the police that are under Kinderman, one of them, I can't remember, I think it's Atkins is the guy's name. He was also in that movie, in The Ninth Configuration. So,
no, I'll definitely find that. And
watch it's kind of like a weird Sergio Leone type thing, where the same actors show up in different things throughout a series of movies. But
that's another thing that's going to come up when we're talking about Dirty Harry. So.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So if you have access to Canopy through your library, you people out there, all 12 of you, Ninth Configuration is on there for free, so if you can stream it for free.
Nice.
Speaking of actors, I have a few actors I want to call out. I mean, we've talked about fucking George C. Scott.
Was he dressed like a priest?
Like a priest?
Were there any signs of injuries, blood, lacerations?
That would be in the file.
It is not in the file. It is not.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit more about some of the other actors in the movie, because there are a few little pressure points in the movie that I feel like if those actors weren't there, the movie would be less scary and less effective.
Definitely.
Scott Wilson was one as Dr. Temple. I think he's fantastic as kind of like the Renfield to the Gemini Killer's Dracula in the movie.
Definitely.
The scene where Temple has to talk to Kinderman in his office, and Kinderman goes in, and his office has like centerfolds kind of cut out and framed almost in a religious relief type thing on the wall. And he tells this information to Kinderman to try to kind of point him to Patient X, Father Karras, the Gemini Killer, that entity. Because that entity wants to get Kinderman, because I guess Kinderman was the one who sacked the Gemini Killer 15 years before.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But when Dr. Temple has to tell this, he's practicing it. He's written it down. And he's trying to figure out a way to deliver it to make it sound like he's just talking to Kinderman and giving him information. Yeah. And then later when Kinderman actually comes in, he's telling him this stuff as he's got an open drawer in his desk next to him, Dr. Temple does, and he kind of glances at it every once in a while when he forgets his line.
Yeah.
And it's just so creepy.
It is.
You can feel then that there's a trap being set, but you're not sure that if it's set by the killer or if Dr. Temple is kind of like gone off on his own little side quest here.
Yeah. I thought that character was just so odd and definitely helped kind of create the like weirdness ambiance that more where you're like, what is that guy's deal?
Yeah, right.
Trust no one kind of thing.
The thing about him too, and I think partly it's him, but partly it's also his part. He's one of the things about the movie that made it feel like kind of the embodiment of a 1990 horror movie to me.
Yeah.
You know,
that's-
I mean, that
yeah.
and the way some of the stuff was shot, in some of the instances where there's supposed to be some comedy or something, there's a little bit of an 80s hangover stylistically, you know, because the late 80s got stylistically a little glossy and
Yeah.
a little odd. And sometimes it was odd for being odd and not
Yeah.
for any purpose. Here, I think there's a purpose to it.
Yeah.
But I do look at this movie and say, oh, yeah, well, it came out in 1990. I never forget when this came out, partly
That's
because it was
funny.
part of its name, but partly because if you just look at it,
Yeah.
it's 1990. If a, you know, kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
if a movie were 1987, it would be Roadhouse, right?
Yeah.
Like if a movie could
Yeah.
be 1987, it would be Roadhouse. If a
Yeah.
movie could be 1990, it would be Exorcist 3 to me.
That all tracks.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because of Scott Wilson, you know, just his presence and the way he carries himself.
Yeah, and I think I kind of guessing where you're going with some of this too, and I would say definitely him, but then also how Nancy Fish is used, because she is just one of those presences that you're like, if you tell me that she's nice and awesome, I'll believe it. If you tell me she's the killer, I believe it also.
And she's kind of set up to be the killer in the church scene, or at
Right.
least to be helping out, because she brings an old woman to the church for confession around the time the priest is killed in the confessional.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you hear the priest was killed in the confessional, you think, wait a minute, I saw that one nurse.
Yeah.
And then after Father Dyer's murder
Yeah.
in the hospital, she's talking to Kinderman and she's trying to suppress a smile.
Yeah.
And it's so creepy.
Yeah, she just plays creepy so well.
She does. And in this movie, it's interesting because then later on, she wraps up Kinderman's hand
Yeah.
after he slaps patient X. And
Yeah.
he says, you know, thank you, you're very kind. And she says, basically, come on, I'm a bitch.
Yeah.
You
yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
but she becomes this endearing character because I was gonna say because of something, and then I don't know how. I don't know how she does
Yeah.
it. It's
No,
like
totally.
it's magic the way she does that. I don't know how she does it.
No, I think the scene that you just said to me illustrates it. But yeah, her presence is just either completely creepy or like, I don't know, she's always a win, but also like 90s.
Yeah. Right. Well, and she has a face. This is going to sound bad coming out. I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to clarify myself. She has a face that was made for this kind of film.
Exactly.
In that it is
Exactly.
so unique. And you recognize her immediately, and she has such a great acting range that she can take that face and make it do whatever it needs to do to make you feel the way you need to feel about that character at that particular moment.
Exactly. And can use it to surprise you.
Exactly.
Which is
Exactly.
a strength.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Ed Flanders, we talked a little bit about him, but as Father Dyer,
yeah, he's
he's
great.
excellent. I mean, he's like the only sane person of the main characters in the film, I think.
Yeah. So you knew
Yeah.
he was going down.
Yeah, you know, he's a red shirt.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but he's, you know, I like that his wit is sharp, but it's not presentational. Like Kinderman's wit is presentational. It's always like, I've read all of Shakespeare, so I'm now making this joke, and the fact that you don't get it is part of the joke. You know, it's all kind of a condescension and a presentation, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Dyer's not like that, and Ed Flanders, I think, is great because the line at the beginning where Father Dyer's talking to his superior in the church, and the superior's getting on his case because he offended some donor or something. And he
Yeah.
says, what did you say to him? And he says,
Jesus loves you. Everyone else thinks you're an asshole.
Yeah, yeah.
it kills me every time because he
Yeah.
delivers it so effortlessly,
Totally.
you know, and a lot of actors would have made a meal out of that line.
Oh my God, totally.
But he just keeps eating his breakfast while he says it, you know? He's excellent in the movie. He's really perfect. And he's so perfect that when he dies in the movie, I'm disappointed.
Yeah,
Because I'm like,
absolutely.
he's going away, you know? So
Because you talk about him being a calming influence, but like the scenes with him and George C. Scott are just so good.
it's the most grounded that Scott gets in the entire film.
Exactly. And once that guy is gone, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I think of the scene where Kinderman is telling Father Dyer about how he hasn't been able to bathe in a few days because his mother-in-law is visiting and she brought a carp, and you have to keep a carp alive until you're ready to cook it because of toxins or something. And so it's been swimming in his bathtub and he hasn't taken a bath.
Yeah. And you just see Dyer's face. He's just cracking up. He's just like...
He starts laughing, and you know he's probably laughing a little bit out of character because they're really close to each other.
They are.
And George C. Scott's talking in this dead serious voice, really low. But the fact that he laughs then kind of gives me permission to laugh, but I'm more laughing at Father Dyer's take on the situation rather than laughing at actually what George C. Scott is saying.
Oh my God, totally. George C. Scott must have been just so weird in real life. Like one of those guys, I can only imagine that if you were just at a bar with him, you have no idea what's going to happen. It's going to get loud. Yeah. For sure.
And then quiet, and then loud, and then quiet.
But that he would just pull stuff like that out. I don't feel like that's so much like these are my movie lines, like Christopher Walken or someone else, where they're just gonna say some stuff and you're like, where is there a script somewhere? Where's this coming from? Like just the randomness, but that the sincerity at the same time. I would want to go to a bar with that guy all the time and just listen.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, if he's like Kinderman in real life, like I wouldn't want to, but I have a sense that he was in some ways probably a bit more approachable than somebody like a Kinderman would be. But I don't know. I mean, he's one of those guys that I'm kind of like, I love his work for the most part. But he's also one of those guys that I'm like, I don't want to learn too much.
Yeah. No, he would terrify me at moments, but I would still just want to sit there and hang out. And
I would be afraid it would be like an Oliver Reed level horror show if I really, dug into it.
That's a good point. Well, one of the other people I thought this about was Kevin Spacey, and so that was ill-advised. So I may have a bad barometer for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
At least there's always Clint Eastwood who would just...
Oh, yeah.
You just would want that. Anyway,
I
digress.
Well, and, honestly, speaking of one of George C. Scott's better moments, I thought, in the film even, was the moment that he had with Miss Clelia, the little old lady who's in the what do they call it? It's not called the dementia ward. It's called like neurology or something like that. They might call it the dementia ward. I can't remember, which is kind of weird.
I know.
So Miss Clelia is played by Mary Jackson, and there's the scene where he goes in because she's implicated in one of the murders.
Yeah.
And so he goes in to see her, and she's usually catatonic, but she starts talking to him about her radio.
Mrs. Clelia, my name is William Kinderman.
Yes.
Would you help me, please?
What about my radio?
Pardon me?
I said my radio. Aren't you going to fix it? Nothing ever gets fixed around here. Just a bunch of pies and anchovies. Go away. I don't ever talk to strangers.
I'm the radio repairman, Mrs. Clelia.
Well, fix it.
Well, what's wrong with it?
Dead people talking.
Lab technician to oncology. Lab technician to oncology.
It's right here. Do you see it?
Yes, I see it.
I just knew you weren't really a radio repairman. That's a telephone I'm holding. It's all right. A lot of people wouldn't know the difference either. It's all right. You have a very kind face. You will do well. Mm-hmm.
She was perfect, just kind of coming in and out of clarity.
Yeah.
And again, making it look so real and being kind of like this point in this movie where you think, okay, well, we have a patient that's possessed by a legion of demons and a dead serial killer down the hall. But here we have a real woman.
Yeah.
And here we have a real person who had a real life, and that interior life especially is now gone.
Yeah.
And I liked how Scott reacted to her because it was very kind. It was probably just about as kind as he gets in the film, I think.
Totally.
But when she looked at him and said that he had a kind face and that he'd go far, I'd say, really? Are you sure?
Yeah.
I don't know. Kind? Is that?
Yeah, that's not what I would ever use as a descriptor. She's another cast choice where you're like, if she's just sitting catatonic, you're like, you are wasting this.
Yeah,
and
right.
then it's good to see that you're like, no, we were saving her for
this
spot.
Well, and then they had her climbing on the ceiling, which was not her. And you could obviously see that it wasn't her, you know.
But what's funny is I didn't know anything about like this being called Legion. But there is a movie called Legion with Paul Bettany as an angel and and in that movie there's this kindly old woman who comes in, turns out she's possessed by a demon, and then she hops up on the ceiling and crawls across it just like her.
I remember that, yeah.
And I was like, there's no way this isn't like on purpose.
Yeah.
I just was like, hey, look, it looks creepy to have an old woman crawling on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh, your movie's called Legion.
Yeah.
And you're doing like...
Okay, yeah. I see where you're
at.
It's
like, all right, that's pretty on the nose, but now that I know, but...
You know, the radio thing is kind of interesting because in the book, that's a whole subplot. There's this whole other character that's not in the movie. I think he's like a neurosurgeon or something like that. And his wife had passed away a few years earlier, and he had become really religious and had kind of gone off the rails. And there's this whole thing about how he starts doing this research where he's trying to contact the dead through radios. And so it was interesting that they kind of brought that up, at least.
Yeah.
I think that subplot in this movie probably wouldn't have worked. I mean, it would have had to probably be an extension off of the Dr. Temple character, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Here, but that was an extra character, so it was kind of cool that they referenced it, and in a way that you got to see Mary Jackson do her work. So,
well, that's the thing. I figured that was the way that she was first approached by the demon. Like he was just going through it, and then
I think they show another woman fiddling with an old radio.
Yeah.
In that ward. And then I think somebody's fiddling with a radio in the dream sequence that Kinderman has.
Dream sequence is unreal.
I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's take an intermission. And then let's come back and talk about the dream sequence because there are quite a few cameos in there that I thought were interesting. And then we can talk about how this movie connects with Zodiac.
Sounds good.
It's intermission. Rise and stretch time. Time to refresh yourself and visit our snack bar. Got a yen for hot popcorn? Your favorite soft drinks are sparkling cold. The juicy
Roscoe Lippin' Butts.
Frank sizzling hot. There's delicious Schlené coffee freshly brewed. And all kinds of ice cream and candy to tempt you. Showtime will be announced loud and clear to get you back to your car in time. So stretch your legs. Come to the snack bar now.
"90 seconds until showtime."
Coming soon to this drive-in theater.
This is about a movie about a couple of killers. Harry Callahan. And a homicidal maniac. The one with the badge is Harry.
Halt!
reasons they called him Dirty Harry. And he kept inventing new ones.
Don't pass out on me.
Clint Eastwood. Detective Harry Callahan. You don't assign him
Stop!
to murder cases. You just turn him loose.
Now, what the hell is he doing up there?
And now, on with the show.
So, the dream sequence. Let's talk about this. Because Kinderman has this dream, and it's weird. There are two different dreams in this movie. One of them is, I think, Patient X's dream.
Yeah.
Which we see at the beginning with the little boy and
the
rose. And then the other one is the hospital station in the afterlife that Kinderman goes to.
I mean, that's probably the best description I can think of. It's so bizarre, and lots of angels.
Yeah.
Like Fabio.
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 Yeah, the cameos are something. Fabio as an angel. Patrick Ewing as the angel of death.
Ewing. Yeah. Samuel Jackson is just a blind man sitting.
Yeah, and dubbed. His voice was dubbed over. I mean,
it's just him. I had to kind of back it up, and then I looked it up.
Yeah, you can tell it's him, but he's there so quickly, and he's off to the side of the screen, so you're not really looking at him.
But mostly it was me going, is that Patrick Ewing?
Yeah.
As an angel, a huge angel sitting next to... Wait, what?
Yeah.
And he's with Dyer, who you're looking at, and he's got the stitches around his head, which you're like, oh, well, okay.
Yeah, because this is kind of foretelling Father Dyer's death, so you know that it's real on some level.
The little old women playing instruments, and then, of course, you have to, like, mess with the time and make it all super creepy. And
like, there are women playing instruments, and there's also like this big band of people all in angel row, or angels, I guess.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. I guess everybody's wearing a white robe, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you have the angel of death, and he looks like he's using tarot cards. It seems like.
Definitely.
And Kinderman, actually, when he first comes in, he sees Thomas Kintry, which is the little boy who was killed at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And his murder kind of sets everything off.
Yeah.
And he says, hello, Thomas, I'm sorry you were murdered. And then just a smile on his face. And it's total dream logic, because you look at it at first, you're kind of like, why isn't he horrified? And you're like, no, this man's dreaming. If you're in a dream, you know, I had a dream this morning that I showed up to a reunion of people from the grocery store I used to work at in the 90s, or in the 80s and 90s. And we were in a garage, and I was worried because the torn up shirt that I wore to bed was the shirt that I was wearing along with a rumpled pair of pleated pants. And I needed a new shirt. You know, and so it just totally made sense to me. I need a new shirt. Yeah. And it didn't occur to me that it could be a dream because I couldn't put the shirt on. It took me for fucking ever to put the shirt on.
Yeah.
So Kinderman's reacting in a way that is totally taking advantage of dream logic.
Yeah.
And I was okay with it. I mean, sometimes with dream sequences, I'm kind of like, well, people don't dream that way, or they don't necessarily react that way. But they also don't react in a nonsensical way either, which is the way some people go with dream sequences. This one I liked because you knew something was up, but then when you saw Dyer, you're just like, oh, fuck, this is bad, you know?
Yeah.
And then they had the shots of Dyer, like the quick shot of him raising up and slamming back down in his hospital bed over and over again.
It was suitably creepy. And I really like that there weren't like 8 more dream sequences.
Right. Yeah.
It just set a tone. Just you're off kilter. Like and then they just kind of go with the movie. And I just thought, for some reason, I'm watching it, I'm just like, this is really effectively creepy.
Yeah.
And the fact that there weren't any more.
Yeah.
That was so much better.
Well, I think too that once you have the idea that he's getting information in this dream that is real world information that he wouldn't possibly know.
Yeah.
That's when it kind of bridges the gap, because the first dream sequence at the very beginning, we don't know that it's a dream sequence. We just see this little boy hiding in an alcove on a city street in Georgetown. And the camera is a point of view of a person or entity or something walking down the sidewalk. And then you see the little boy again, and he has a rose, and I think there's like a cross there or something.
Yeah.
And you realize later on that must be Father Karras's and the Gemini Killer and Legion, like all of them kind of like sharing this brain.
Yeah, that's funny because I hadn't thought that. Like when you said that before, I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
But now that you're saying it, I'm like, yeah, okay, I did not catch that.
Yeah, because the Gemini says at one point something about like, I'm not sure what it is, but there's this dream and there's a rose in it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and actually, if you look at that dream at the very beginning and you watch really closely, it actually tells you who the killer is right up front. If you watch down the street closely, you can see this priest running back and forth, and he'll
that's
run.
right.
And then you go up a little bit, and then he's running again, way up ahead. Well, that tells you right away that's Father Karras, because one of the things with him in the first film was that he was a runner.
Yeah.
And that's, one of the first few times we see him, he's running laps,
That is funny.
And so it's interesting the way the movie bridges the gaps between the dream world and the real world, and it almost makes the dream world preferable in some ways, especially in the second dream,
Yeah.
As far as like other cameos go really quickly, when Kinderman and Dyer are in the restaurant having dinner, you get to see Larry King, it's deceased. Isn't he deceased now?
Yes.
Yeah. The, what was he? Newscaster, news pundit personality thing.
He's one of those people who's like Regis Philbin, like he's done everything and you're like, but he's Regis. And so he's
right.
He was Larry King for a living.
Larry King like did a lot of stuff, but he wasn't particularly good at any of it.
Yeah. But he was confident.
His appearance here almost made this a prequel to Jurassic Park, because even then he was an old dude.
That is funny.
But and then C. Everett Koop, who was the former Surgeon General. He was
that was like double take moment where I'm like, wait.
Yeah, the beard.
Your list of cameos.
Yeah.
And there's C. Everett Koop.
Well, if you think about it, though, it being in Georgetown, both of those guys would be there.
That's true.
But yeah, seeing C. Everett Koop, I'm just like, you notice the beard first. And then you go up and see the vaguely like Gordon's fisherman kind of facial bone structure.
Yeah.
But
and you're not like, oh, that's just another guy with that beard. No one else has that beard.
No.
He's like got the market cornered.
Yeah. No one. I mean, he even rocks it a little bit more than Lincoln does.
That's a good point.
But
he definitely did longer than Lincoln did.
Wow. Damn.
Wow, too soon?
Too soon on the Lincoln? Yeah, a little too soon on the Lincoln.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm going to need about 75 more years,
All right. Noted.
Oh, my God. So to close this out, we don't put this segment in any consistent place within these episodes, but to close this out, let's talk about the connections and similarities with Zodiac, because this is Zodiac month.
Yeah.
We are celebrating this hallowed 30 days of
yes.
That the movie, not the killer, because
that's totally. Well, there's the Gemini Killer, so,
right.
I mean,
modeled on the Zodiac Killer, so that's
Which I do also like that it's like, even though Legion implies that there are many more, you've really got Karras and Character X, the Gemini Killer.
Right.
Which the Gemini being twins, you're like, all right, cool. There's two people. So they didn't just pick like some Zodiacs. Like there's some level of thought, which all goes out the window if it's just called Legion, because that just implies that's a direct reference to the biblical many.
Right.
But so there's that. What's next on our connection list?
They're handwritten notes. The Gemini Killer does one. He puts It's a Wonderful Life, and it's misspelled as wonderful, F-U-L-L, on Dyer's hospital room wall after he kills Father Dyer. And Father Dyer's death is particularly heinous and something that probably the real Zodiac maybe would have done if he was truly the killer that he said he was, because Dyer's...
if he was as smart as everybody says.
Right. If he was nearly as intelligent as everybody gives him credit for. But Dyer's like drained of all of his blood, and it's put in these little jars on the hospital table, and the killer doesn't spill a single drop except for the blood that he uses to write It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, which there was a lot of blood used
to
write that.
Yeah. And it does vaguely look like the Zodiac killer's handwriting, just a little bit. You know, the kind of people that when they write the letter D, they just swing it up with...
What? Serial killers, you mean? You're talking about serial killers?
Yeah, you know, the kids that are like diagnosed in grade school, you know?
Yep. It's worse. It was at IUPUI, so
wow. They
way
caught,
later in life.
They caught you way late. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, that explains so much. Why am I always hiding bodies? Now I know.
But yeah, so Father Dyer and Kinderman go to see It's a Wonderful Life at the Repertory Theater earlier in the film, and that's where the reference comes from.
I like that their reason that they each give is that they have to cheer the other one up at this time of year.
Yeah, because of Karras's death. That's the whole thing, is that they're commemorating his death, so they have to cheer each other up. And
which is just kind of funny, because I thought that was an actually realistic touch.
Yeah.
Where each person does think they're the one helping the other one out.
Yeah, it was a nice touch.
The need for representation in the press.
Yeah. You mentioned that earlier, and that's the big one. I mean, the Gemini killer just out and out demands it in his conversations with Kinderman.
Which is one of the best, creepiest scenes there is in the movie.
Yeah.
When they swap places because George C. Scott says Gemini is dead.
Yeah, right.
Brad Dourif jumps in, and I'm like, oh, that is awesome.
Incidentally, who's this Damien you mentioned?
Don't you know?
I know nothing, except I must go on killing Daddy. I must shame him. Are they calling these Gemini killings in the papers? You must get them to do that, Lieutenant. It's important.
The Gemini is dead.
No, I am not! I'm alive! I go on! I breathe! Look at me! Look at me! And tell me what you see.
I see a man who looks like Damien Karras.
If you looked with the eyes of faith, you'd see me.
The hell are you talking about?
Your blindness. Tell the press that I am the Gemini Lieutenant, or I will punish you.
So that is super fucking creepy. And even more so with headphones on.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know why. I was like, I'm watching it the first time, but wow. Like, you know, the volume ramps up, and I was just like, ooh, that scene is good. So
yeah. It's probably the best usage of that switching, I think, in the film. Although that's like saying it's the best use of that in a film of fantastic usages of that switching.
Exactly.
And I honestly, while we're talking about this, like, I don't really have a problem with the ending, with the exorcism, with the tiles falling away and Karras coming up and he's on the cross with all those demons and stuff like out of the floor. I have a problem with that, quite honestly. The only problem I have, and we haven't talked about this yet, but we can talk about it. The exorcism is because of this guy, Father Morning, who is a complete subplot in the movie that only has maybe 2 scenes. He's like, they show him earlier, and then he comes in to start the exorcism at the end that prevents the Gemini killer from killing Kinderman's daughter through an older dementia patient.
Which, I mean, it's so weird for a priest to be like this Deus Ex Machina character.
Yeah.
I remember that guy, Excalibur, was one of the first movies I saw when we had cable as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And I just remember that guy was like Merlin. I'm like, hey, isn't that Merlin from Excalibur?
That's Merlin with his hair completely frosted.
I know. They're like, his hair turned white. I'm like, he saw somebody to do that.
But yeah, the weird thing about him, though, is that like he's shown one scene with the crucifix falling down and Jesus weeping blood. And then he goes to do the exorcism and then he dies.
Well, and this is my only problem. I have no problem with the exorcism scene. I do get the studio being like, hey, we need an exorcism in there. You're like, well, it's in the name. Okay.
Yeah, answers in the question, kind of.
Exactly. But this is where lots of films use exorcisms. And invariably, there's one part where the demon is so powerful that you're like, how does this work ever?
Yeah.
So the demon slaps him up against the ceiling and super glues him there, so he rips his skin off and dies.
Yeah.
At what point were you ever going to win? I don't know.
That is one thing where, I mean, and I'm obviously saying this as we're talking about a movie about an exorcism, but it's where these movies kind of stretch the logic for me. And it's not even just like real life logic, but it's just internal logic.
Exactly.
And I'm sure that, for priests who have performed these exorcisms and for them, they're very real.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they say, well, anybody is susceptible to it. But I also wonder if they look at these kinds of movies and say, well, yeah, I know that was written by a Catholic and a believer, but this isn't like cancer we're dealing with in that there's a remission. Like we have cases where we have exorcised and then that person is just fine for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even the case that the original Exorcist was based on, apparently that kid was actually a boy. Apparently he just lived out the rest of his life and he was fine. So I don't know. I mean, that's the kind of thing where I'm like, I'm with you, because then you have this thing where it's like this priest was actually coming at you as a demon, and you rolled this motherfucker up like a pig in a blanket and put him on the ceiling, and then he rips his face off and dies, basically.
Yeah.
But then you didn't do that to Kinderman, because they do put Kinderman up on the wall. But it's not the same. They don't go for the jugular like right away.
Totally.
So,
there's a movie called The Right with Anthony Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the other guy in it. And it's one of those things where it's like a slow burn kind of thing where Anthony Hopkins is the exorcist who becomes possessed, but it's over time and it's him realizing it's happening.
Right.
It's just really, I like that movie. It's pretty interesting. But this is where a lot of movies drop once you have the supernatural element involved. It's genuinely like, all right, so how strong is this demon?
Yeah.
And so this demon is apparently too strong to be exorcised. Like, based on like I don't know. It's just what movie logic is it that covers how strong the demons are. And this guy walks in like a rock star priest, like if anybody's gonna do it, it's him. And up to a point you're like, he's doing it, and then you're like, nope.
Yep, nope. Within 2 minutes this is done. This over
he's
with.
Dead.
Yeah. And the other thing too that's kind of weird in this movie specifically is that I wonder to myself, how do you cast out a demon or an entity who has enough control and enough power to project itself into other humans, and then come back almost like it's a revolving door?
Yeah.
I don't know. And like we were talking about earlier, if you kill that thing, then what happens?
Right.
Like, then do those things go to Kinderman, or what happens? So from that perspective, the movie doesn't work.
Yeah.
Of course, I still love the movie so much that I overlook all that stuff,
No, that's the thing. Like, I have no problem with the exorcism part. I think that the more effective use of it, I don't know, I guess the exorcism bit was a little over the top as far as like, oh, that guy's dead. But it ultimately ended up being that George C. Scott's just freeing his friend.
Yeah,
and then fucking someone else over because that demon's going somewhere.
Yeah, right.
But at least Karras is going to be fine.
Right.
Ish.
Well, I mean, I feel like, too, that the movie is, an hour and 44 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, you tack on another 10, 15 minutes that address Father Morning as a character, and I'm good.
Yeah, true.
Because he has, I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking on, he has some sort of connection to the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I can't remember what it is.
I think that is very telling that we're both talking about this movie, and you love this movie, and neither one of us can really remember where he came from.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
he's lauded as, I think, if I'm remembering right, initially he's lauded as a powerful priest when it comes to exorcising.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, both of us don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is telling.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the thing too is if I go back to really watch the film to try to figure out that stuff, I still will get so wrapped up in the movie that I won't figure it out because I'll forget, you know?
No, that's the stuff that won't stick.
Yeah.
Like, there's always going to be, like, that's it for me with, like, wait, so is it actually Karras's body or what? But then I lose track of it because it just doesn't matter. Like, in the scenes when they're swapping places.
Right.
I'm not hung up on that. I let that go.
Yeah.
I'm just watching it happen and going, wow, this is amazing.
It's one of those things that once you hook into it, you just don't get out of it. You just kind of follow it wherever it goes.
Right.
And really, for me, my only problem with the movie is that I wanted more of it. I was like, you know, if Friedkin could have made the original Exorcist like 2 hours, and I mean, I think that re-release is 2 hours and 20 some minutes. I'm like, this movie could be 2 hours. You know?
Yeah.
But we were getting into the 1990s where, you know, coming out of the 80s, everybody was like, oh, you know, we got to keep movies down and they got to be 9 minutes and all this stuff. So the other thing, though, getting back to the Zodiac similarities to close that out, the lack of consistent fingerprint evidence, which I thought was
that's a good point.
Interesting. Like in this, because the Gemini is projecting itself or himself out of Karras's body and into other patients like dementia patients and other people, there's never any consistent fingerprint evidence at any of the murder sites. Like they'll get fingerprints, but then they don't make any sense.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting connection with Zodiac.
Yeah. No, that's true.
The final thing goes back to your point on the press coverage. And that's the idea of feeding disinformation to the press.
Yeah.
Kinderman tells the hospital administrator about how, you know, the cops fed disinfo to the public about which finger the Gemini cut off and where he left his mark on the body so that they could weed out crackpots and false confessions and stuff like that. And people coming in and accusing, you know, Uncle Joe of being the Gemini killer.
Yeah.
So in thinking about that with relation to the Zodiac and the case, like, we see a lot of misinformation in the Zodiac killer, or a lot of, I mean, in Zodiac, I should say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We see like instances of people saying, oh, I thought it was this way. It's like, no, it was like this, you know?
Yeah.
Or we've talked about how Paul Avery and other journalists needled the killer by misrepresenting him or misrepresenting like the killings. And some of the killings I think I talked about like way back when Ryan and I did the Blow by Blow episode on Zodiac, talking about how like if you read some of Avery's coverage from that time, he's getting all these facts wrong about just basic facts about how many times a person was stabbed or something, you know, just like stuff that you would think would be, okay, I've got that down, and I know those are true. Okay, what's the rest of it? In this movie, the way Kinderman lays out what they told the public versus what was real, it makes me wonder if there's any information that we, as the general public, have been relying on about the Zodiac murders for decades that maybe isn't real.
That is just manufactured to get a rise out of Zodiac?
Yeah. I mean, because I think some of it's fallibility of memory because, you know, you're not allowed to write down anything when you go look at the Zodiac case files, or at least you weren't.
Yeah.
So you're writing stuff down, and inevitably somebody's going to get something wrong. I mean, and a lot of people, if you look at Graysmith's books, they would say that there's a large percentage of those books that aren't true.
Yeah.
So my question is, I wonder if any of that is actually intentionally untrue, or if it's just a matter of, well, people just mix things up, or they, you know, just miss something or whatever.
I don't know how it's not all of that. at the same time.
Right.
Like,
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, that's funny.
I'd be really interested to know if the police ever did put out anything that wasn't true. I guess
just patently false, just to...
Yeah, I guess, I've answered my own question, I think, in my head, because if you listen to those detectives talk about that time, they always say, well, we didn't have the word serial killer, like that term in our vocabulary yet. So we weren't really thinking about the whole idea of thousands of people showing up to confess to murders.
Yeah.
Falsely confess. So they probably didn't put out knowingly false information just to weed out people.
It invariably makes me more frightened of the serial killer who couldn't care less about press, doesn't want to be noticed.
Right.
Like, that's the one I'm going to worry about more.
That's the one I think is probably the more realistic.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the Zodiac is an anomaly precisely because he craved press attention. And I also feel like the fact that he craved press attention makes it less likely that he actually killed as many people as he said he did, or any people at all. I'm not saying that these murders are hoaxes. Obviously, those murders happened.
Yeah.
But I also think that constantly discounting a suspect for one murder because he doesn't fit the other four.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. It's
totally.
It's it's people make fun of the magic bullet theory, which actually, if you look at the science, the magic bullet theory isn't a magic bullet. It's,
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's kind of shoddy in a way, especially when the only way that we really know that these were connected are because, some of the letters had details in them that they said only the killer would know. But in reality, if you look back, not really, because of the police scanner thing.
Yeah, totally. And then to your point, if they're saying that, who knows if that part's true? Only no one but Zodiac would know this, and you're like, is that true?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, interesting stuff. I'm sure that anybody who has studied the Zodiac case is probably sitting out there. Don't throw your phone down. Just throw your earbuds if they're not too expensive.
Save your phone.
Yeah, save your phone. If you get upset, scream into a pillow.
That's good advice.
Not the one that your dad farted in first. Not that one. But
although that one would, anyway.
A clean.
I was going to go down a rabbit hole. Yeah. I stopped myself.
Yeah. Okay, so remake or Rembrandt?
This one, I mean, it's a Rembrandt.
Yeah.
I don't want it remade.
Right.
I don't want to see someone else try and do what Brad Dourif did, what Jason Miller did, what anybody did.
I don't think it's possible.
That's a good point.
And the reason I think it's not possible is because I think that there aren't a lot of filmmakers who would show the restraint in so much of the film nowadays.
That's true.
I think any remake of The Exorcist 3 would be all the spider walk that we got in the director's cut of Exorcist 1,
What's funny is I totally agree with that. And one thing I was thinking is when you were describing the static shot of the hallway and stuff, there are a lot of moments where this reminded me of American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
In that the way they use nightmares to accent stuff, but then they're just scenes where it's just going on for a little while. I don't know. There was something about the ambience of it. And then when they made another one of those, American Werewolf in Paris or something, it was all CGI and all action and all. So I totally think you're right. No one would do this again. They're going to make it all effectsy.
Yes. I mean, I agree with that because, if you look at those hospital sets, if I'm not mistaken, I think that at least some of those shots, that's an optical illusion. Those sets are built so that they actually collapse.
Oh, that's cool.
So that the people that were standing outside the hospital door way down the hallway were just shorter people standing next to shorter doors.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, and I think it was done to save room, but still give a sense of scope. But nice. I think it also adds this unreality to the movie.
Yeah.
That just kind of travels right beneath the surface of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And I agree with you. I think today that just wouldn't be the case. I mean, it would just be all spider walk. It would all be Reagan or Mrs. Clelia walking on the ceiling. That's what it would
all
be.
you would need to see is the 3-minute long trailer.
Exactly.
And then you're like, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know. I don't have to see that movie. And if people ask me about it, I'll be able to tell them every story point that's in it.
And if you literally just told them what happened in the trailer, you also just told them everything that happened in the movie.
Right.
That's just...
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I think Rembrandt for sure.
Me too.
Yay.
It's a Rembrandt. Wow.
And I'm really happy because I had not seen it. It somehow was off my radar for whatever reason, and that's awesome.
Wow. It's always nice to... Well, no, I was going to say something. That's not... I can't say that. All right. Well, I guess join us next week. We will be talking double feature next week.
There we go.
With Dirty Harry and the Most Dangerous Game. So be there or...
Just download it and be somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Go somewhere else.
Listen to it later somewhere else.
Yeah, don't stream it. Be a dinosaur. Download that son of a bitch.
There you go.
You know?
There you go.
Even if it's 4 hours long. I mean, it's probably not going to be 4 hours. It might be like 6, but it's not going to be 4.
That's a good point.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Art House Drive-In Picture Show. We hope you enjoyed our feature this evening. Our show is edited and produced by Markham Harvey. Our executive producer is Ryan Mason. Our logo and artwork are created by Rafifi Randolfo. Our announcers are
Lila Pseudonym
and
Lane Hewitt.
Follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Arthouse Drive-In, or head over to our website at arthousedrivein.com, or shoot us an email at arthousedrivein@gmail.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or any other podcatcher of your choice. Most importantly, though, tell your friends. Sneaking your buddies into the Art House Drive-In in the trunk is not only allowed, it's encouraged. Sure, our head ticket guy, Stubbs, won't like it, but we'll vouch for you. We're your friends. We're not like the others. Join us next time for another fantastic episode of the Art House Drive-In Picture Show. We appreciate your patronage. Don't forget to hang up your speaker, and please drive carefully on your way out.
Was he into movies? Was he a movie buff?
I can tell you that he was not into people.